Every man should be able to do 15 pull-ups. Or should they? I've stirred quite a bit of controversy saying this, but here's the truth. How many pull-ups, push-ups, or even dips that you're capable of doing is more based on your training age and experience. What a beginner is capable of shouldn't be what an advanced trainee is capable of. So today I figured that we'll dissect the bodyweight strength standards for each level. We're gonna discuss not only reps, but also skills too. Starting off first with beginners. Now, in my opinion, a beginner is somebody who has a training age of 3 months or less. Clearly, this person is very inexperienced. They probably have never done a push-up in their life or perhaps even a pull-up in their life. They are super novice when it comes to their exercise level, to their strength levels. And for that reason, that's why their criteria or the strength standards are so low. So to classify yourself as a beginner in terms of calisthenics numbers, your push-ups will be 15 or less, your pull-ups will be 5 or less, and your dips will be 10 or less. In my opinion, that sounds like very beginner sort of reps, right? Most people usually start around somewhere in terms of the beginning strength at that level. Now your goal should be 20 plus push-ups, 5 plus pull-ups, and 10 plus dips in order to move towards that, that more advanced sort of beginner level to where we're actually moving more towards intermediate. And actually a lot of these strength standards and rep requirements come from my bodyweight bodybuilder program, in which I made now over 5 years ago. So they still hold true to this day. Now, as a beginner, it's not about necessarily what you're capable of. It's more so about building your foundation. Every expert at anything was always a beginner at one point in time. So for that reason, getting your reps up in just the standard movements is always taught, so that once you build that solid foundation, you can then transfer that strength into other more advanced things. Because think about it, every single advanced push-up variation, every single advanced pull-up variation, where does it stem from? It simply stems from the basics. Me personally, my initial strength base was actually beyond a beginner, and we're gonna get to that here soon. I'm gonna talk more about that. But looking at these numbers, I realized that I actually didn't start from a quite complete beginner. And if you have any experience within sports, athletics, or you were just an active kid growing up, chances are you probably didn't start here either. Now, in terms of skills, I believe every beginner should learn the handstand, elbow lever, and the L-sit, if we're talking just strictly static skills. And the reason is because these skills allow the most carryover and transferable strength into other harder skills. So just like the foundational basic push-up, learning a handstand will help you actually learn a planche eventually, will help go to obviously a handstand push-up. And also these skills really don't require that much strength, but it's more so technique and practice. So you're building that habit over time to actually get good at something. And once you build that habit early on, it's just gonna make the process a lot more easier once you get more advanced. Now let's be real, 70% of you guys probably would fall into the beginner level. Even me creating YouTube videos for the past 7 years, I realized that most people who find me start off at a beginner level. So moving up next to intermediate and advanced, you may not relate to these points, but definitely stick around because one day you might. So in terms of intermediate, I consider this a training age of at least 6 months to a year. Now, everybody's progression ability is going to be a lot more different, right? Some people progress to an intermediate within 3 months, some people 6 months, some people to a year. Remember, all this stuff, especially in terms of bodyweight strength, is based upon how high your body fat percentage is, your starting point. Guys who start off a little skinnier or ectomorphic sort of frames tend to progress a little bit faster versus a guy who's overweight and starting calisthenics. So you gotta keep all these variables in mind. Now, in terms of strength standards for reps, I believe intermediates are capable of doing 30 plus push-ups, 10 to 15 pull-ups, and then also at least 10 to 15 dips. And all this stuff is in a row in one single set. Now your goal should be 50 plus push-ups, 20 plus pull-ups, while also doing 15 plus dips. So intermediate, that's the strength standard, what you're aiming for, but an intermediate ability is what I initially said. Now, in terms of my videos where I'm like, every guy should be able to do 30 push-ups, every guy should be able to do 15 pull-ups, those strength standards are based upon intermediate abilities. So basically what I'm saying is universally, people should be aiming for an intermediate strength standard, which I believe is fair, right? That's not super controversial to say. Aim for 15 pull-ups, aim to be able to do 30 push-ups in a row. So that way you're separating yourself outside from the beginner numbers, but also you're not really too advanced yet. like I said, you're just simply intermediate. Now, in terms of my personal numbers, once again, I actually started my calisthenics journey based upon intermediate levels, except for pull-ups. Once I came in, I was already able to do 30 push-ups in a row. I was already able to do about 10 or so dips, but with pull-ups, I was only able to do about 5 to 7 based upon my memory. And you know, funny enough, I remember this was back in elementary school. We would have these presidential fitness tests where we had to do the shuttle run. It was like a mile run, pull-ups, a V-sit reach. You guys, if you're in America, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? And looking back, I remember I always did good at pull-ups. I remember I would do about 3 or 4 in a row in elementary school, and nobody else could do any. Like some guys did 1 or 2, but I always got top in the pull-up numbers. And looking back on that, I'm like, was being a pull-up pro sort of my calling? Was that my purpose? Because it started on early on. Even without training the pull-up whatsoever, I was always capable of doing at least 3 to 4. And then once I started working out a little bit, I was able to get to 6 or 7. But after that point, it took actually training to get to 10, 15, 20 plus in a row. Now, I actually wrote down some goals here in which an intermediate should try to aim for in terms of calisthenics exercises, what progressions they should try and reach. And I wrote down here unilateral variations. So I believe if you're capable of the foundational exercises, you know, push-ups, pull-ups at that high degree, like 30 plus reps, 15 plus reps, definitely start training unilateral variations, meaning you're training one side at a time to really advance and progress your strength levels. Also, at this point in time, you can start playing around with muscle ups and maybe get it into weighted calisthenics. I don't believe beginners should necessarily do weighted calisthenics, but once you're at that intermediate level, weighted calisthenics will be the game changer for you, as it has been for me. Once I was able to do, you know, 10, 15 pull-ups and I started working towards my one-arm pull-up, that's when I slowly started adding weight to myself. And that's how I worked myself up to being able to do 200 pounds for a weighted pull-up. Also, in terms of static skills, remember, a beginner working the L-sit, handstand, elbow lever, at this point in time, you should be able to complete those. So this is where you actually start the very basic progressional exercises towards the big levers. So I'm talking the planche, front lever, or even back lever if you want to learn that too. So as an intermediate, you're probably going to spend the majority of your time here, right? Beginner, I believe it's pretty easy to progress beyond that, but intermediate is where you'll actually start to hit plateaus a little bit more. You'll have to be a little bit more structured within your training to really hit that advanced level. And throughout this time period, consistency is your biggest friend, because if you're not consistent in the intermediate level, you're basically going to either regress or stay at this certain point forever. Now, moving on to advanced. So I believe 70% of people will be beginners. 20% of people might make it to intermediate, and then the other 10% of everybody else is going to make it to the advanced levels. So advanced is usually somebody who's been training consistently for at least 2 years, guys, at least 2 years. Some people might be 3, 4. Once again, so many variables at play, but based on a general basis, I believe most people can get to this sort of advanced strength within the 2 years of consistent training. For me, it took about 2 years. So if you're advanced, you're capable of doing at least 50 plus push-ups in a row, at least 20 plus pull-ups in a row, alongside with at least 20 plus dips in a row. And honestly, if you're advanced, you don't even test out your basic number of reps on foundational exercises. And the reason is because they're too easy. So actually, I should be saying if you're advanced, you're capable of at least, 5 muscle ups in a row. Maybe at this point, you can do at least one rep of a one-arm pull-up. You have more access to the higher level sort of exercises. And nowadays, you don't even think about how many reps you can do of a basic push-up, or even in some cases, a pull-up. At this point, your training is really focused on exactly what you want to get better at, because you can do practically everything, right? You can do all these advanced skills, but if you really want to make it to that next level, I'm talking super advanced, not even the top 10%, this is now the top 1%. So learning like a one-arm handstand, learning crazy feats of strength like that, at that point in time, takes precise training while also being very purposeful about what you really want to get better at. So some people, for example, decide they want to go in the static training route. Some people, they want to do just simply weighted calisthenics. Some people are still advanced, but they decide to do just reps of the basic foundational movements. So they do hella reps. hella sets, almost like in a circuit style format. So at this point in time, your training could have a lot of variability to it, and you can either keep getting better and better, or just keep what you're doing now and polish off some of the things that you learned over time and maybe conquer new things. You know, at this point in time, a lot of people tend to do other things. Maybe they try a new training discipline, or they start including weights and hybrid training more into their routine because they feel like they accomplish a lot through calisthenics. And that's where I kind of felt like too. I felt like I got to a point of such advanced calisthenics, and not super advanced, like crazy, insane calisthenics, like I belong in a circuits calisthenics, but I could do all the basic advanced skills. Like I had weighted one arm pull up reps, weighted muscle ups. I can do handstands for, you know, 40 seconds to a minute. 9-degree handstand push-ups. Like I'm capable of all this stuff. So at some point it's like almost I have nothing else to work towards. And I know some of you guys are like, that's not true, Austin, that's not true. But think about it. In order to learn some of these super advanced skills, I'm talking like things that require crazy feats of human strength, not only will that take a very, very long time, but in some cases, you're actually limited based on your genetic capabilities. So a lot of calisthenics is about leverages, right? So how tall you are, how heavy you are, also your mobility and flexibility. I unfortunately am not gifted with a lot of mobility and flexibility. So for that reason, some exercises will actually never come to me. Do you think I'll ever be able to do like a V-sit? Probably not, unless I solely focus on that and I cut out everything else, which clearly I'm not gonna do. So hopefully this explains all the strength levels and progressions associated with bodyweight strength standards. Let me know down in the comments, are you beginner, intermediate, or advanced? And which one has been the hardest for you to break through from? Subscribe, like, I'm gonna see you guys in the next video. Peace.